Do you want to know what the weather's like in Virginia Beach? Well, that's what I'm here to tell you right now. Hey, my name is Sam Sansalone and I'm a real estate agent in Hampton Roads, Virginia, and I'm partially a meteorologist for the next 30 minutes. And if it's your first time here, welcome. Hit the subscribe button, hit the bell notification next to it so you'll be notified every time I do a video about Hampton Roads information and about real estate. And today we're talking about weather in Virginia Beach. So what we'll do is we'll go through all 4 seasons so you can get a good picture, if you've never been here before, about what it's really like to live in Virginia Beach. And if you're from here, let me know how well I did in terms of assessing what it really is like to live in Virginia Beach. Let's start with winter time. For the most part, winter is cold. I mean, it's cold in most places in winter, but is it really cold? I don't know. I grew up here. Now, typical average high temperatures are somewhere in the 40s to low 50s. For about a good solid 3 weeks or so, we'll get 30s constant. And then it kind of fluctuates. And sometimes it dips into the 20s, lows into the 20s, and wind chills down into the single digits very rarely. Now, you think that if we get some cold weather, we might get snow attached with it. Well, I'm sad to say that it usually is not the case. I see probably snow once every 1 to 3 years. And snow really means, could be a dusting, it could be 4 inches, it could be a couple of inches more than that, maybe. But usually there's a projection for snow. The meteorologists talk about it for like 3 or 4 days. Oh, there might be snow coming. And then snow comes and it's like half an inch. Locals can attest to this. We don't know how to drive in snow. So people are often very nervous about driving in snow. The people that are from the north then come here laugh. But places shut down, cities can shut down for 2 or 3 days for even the threat of snow. I've seen it happen. Now, in regards to sledding, if it does snow, there are very few places that you can find that you can sled on or board down. The largest hill in Virginia Beach is Mount Trashmore. That place you cannot sled down, it's not legal. So the most important thing to know about snow here is not necessarily the snow itself, it's the threat of snow and what other people do when it might snow. But that time period lasts usually January to the end of February is our real winter. And again, winter is a loose term, but once you get into the March time frame, what you'll find in March is a hilarious month. March, it just gets windy. I mean, for like 2-3 weeks, it just there's a breeze, which is, it's nice sometimes, but when it's cold, it's windy and cold. It can be as cold as what winter was, or it can often spike up, talking 50s, 60 degrees sometimes, maybe even higher than that. But usually you start averaging into the 50s starting in March, and it's not until you get into the springtime when you start getting into the 60s and higher. Now in the springtime, the temperatures start rising starting in the late March to early April time period. And you'll start seeing flowers bloom in March, and shifting into April, you'll see temperatures going to the 60s, maybe even in the 70s consistently for a week or two. It'll do this for a little bit until you get hit in May. May is an awesome month. I was born in May. It's one of my favorite times of the year, not just because it was my birthday, but mid 70s is very common, mild. The humidity is not too high yet. Lows can dip into the 50s, but usually the 60s. That starts shifting when you go into June. The middle of June, it starts getting hot, 80s into like 90 degrees, and lows will go down into the 70s. And there'll be times during spring seasons where it doesn't rain much at all. And then there'll be times, like one year, it almost rained for the entire month of May. So because of where we are and the climate that we're in, we see a lot of spikes and drops in precipitation and temperatures. It's gonna be really crazy, and you kind of start expecting it, and you're not really shocked whenever something weird happens, like it's rainy and warm on one day and then drops 25 degrees the next day and it's sunny. That's something that is not very common, but it can happen, and it's not something that anyone's too surprised about. Now going into the summertime, we get a decent amount of thunderstorms and we get a lot of humidity. So the temperatures start going up into consistently upper 80s, 90 degrees, then the humidity bumps it up into the heat indexes of the upper 90s in the triple digits. Now that stays until the end of June, till the middle-ish of August, July being the hottest month of the year. One thing that people talk about as far as weather in Virginia Beach that is common amongst everybody is the humidity. Humidity is the wild child here in Virginia Beach, so you can get temperatures in the 70s and 80s, but because of the humidity that pumps up, it feels like 90s into the triple digits. I've been to Vegas and the drier, arid areas in the Southwest and experienced 20-degree higher temperatures down there and come back here and feel a whole lot hotter even though it's only 90 degrees. So the humidity makes a big difference. Now tornadoes, you know, not really. There's not much with tornadoes in the summertime. We've gotten a few threats, and every once in a while a funnel cloud will pop up or someone will talk about it. And this year, actually, ironically, we had a couple touchdown about a month ago, but it really is very rare. Frequency of hurricanes that might come here end up being usually once a year, twice a year. We get some conversation about like what to do, how to prepare for hurricanes. I'd say once a year we get a hurricane that comes towards us close enough to where we have to be pretty aware of it. I'm not saying every hurricane you shouldn't be aware of, but my point is that it doesn't come as close to us. And if it does, it usually turns into a huge rain event and some wind. You can see on the map the mid-Atlantic states just below us, North Carolina and South Carolina, they kind of act as a buffer for hurricanes as they come from the south up to where we are. So what often happens is hurricanes go south towards Florida or northwest up the coast from Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, and if they do head towards our direction, often they hit land early enough to where once they get to us, a lot of it's just rain. So we get a lot of rain for hurricanes that come relatively close to us. Even last year, we evacuated from a hurricane that we thought was gonna hit here. It was coming down from the south from Florida, headed north. We thought it was coming straight for us and it was a really strong storm. And we decided at some point, let's just leave and be safe. We leave, the same day we leave, the forecast changes from going north to going west. So it went right into the southeast instead of us. So we basically took a vacation to the north for several days for nothing. But it was fun nonetheless, but nothing hit us. So that's the point, is that you don't really know, it's hard to predict. But once in a while a hurricane will hit close enough for it to be either a low-end hurricane or a tropical storm once it gets to our area. What starts out as a hurricane potential often turns into a wind event, but not so much wind as much as the rain. The rain can pummel the area, so especially if you live in Norfolk, there are places in Norfolk and Virginia Beach that do flood even without a hurricane, but when you get a hurricane with all the driving winds and the rains, the floodwaters can increase. So be very mindful of where you're living in relation to where those floodwaters are. Talk to those neighbors. I keep talking about this. Talk to your neighbors, the places that you're looking to move to if you plan on moving to some areas, to find out how the flooding really influences that street. Hurricane Isabel has been one of the worst storms that's come here in the last probably 50 to 75 years. In addition to that, Hurricane Matthew in 2016, I'd say didn't have as much damage at all compared to Isabel, but it really illuminated a bigger problem in this area, which is flooding. The area flooded for several weeks in some areas. It was very, very difficult for many residents. If you're not in a high-risk flood zone, you don't need flood insurance technically, but there were neighborhoods that were significantly impacted by the last hurricane, Hurricane Matthew, that didn't fall under a high-risk flood zone and that didn't require them to get flood insurance, but because their neighborhoods flooded, it wiped out a ton of houses. You'll hear stories from neighbors talking about when flooding happened, and you'll see similar storms pop up, different hurricanes, nor'easters that really caused the most rain damage. Now, I'm also going to put some links in the description about the hurricane history in Virginia Beach and the area, so you can get an idea of how often hurricanes come, how bad the storms have been, so you can figure out, okay, is this really a significant thing or not? Now going into the fall, my favorite time of year. Football's starting, the baseball playoffs, it's nice and cool, the leaves start changing. Spring and fall are often very similar with regards to the temperatures. So in the fall, once you get into September, it still feels like summer oftentimes. So in the early September time, you might be still in the 80s sometimes. As you head into the middle of September, the end of September, the temperatures start drifting down into the upper 70s, the mid 70s, and the lows start getting lower, I'd say in the 50s oftentimes. So not until the October time frame where you start seeing temperatures in the consistent 60s, and they start even dropping lower than that. But it stays that stagnant for a little while. From October to November, temperatures don't really get that low, and I'm saying, you know, they stay in the 60s, maybe in the 50s for a while, and every once in a while we see a temperature drop down into the 40s maybe, and it's just really cold for a short time, then it bumps back up again. And it's not until again December where we start seeing colder 40s, 30s more consistently, or we can expect it at least. With precipitation, Still the same goes with fall as it does with spring. You don't really know if you're going to get a lot of rain or not much rain. There are nor'easters to contend with starting in the fall going into the winter time. Nor'easter is a specific type of storm that's mostly a rain and wind event. It's actually more common to see nor'easters where we are than hurricanes. And when you talk to people in Virginia Beach, you're going to find out too that the weather is incredibly fickle. I've had times in seasons where I've worn a t-shirt on Christmas, and I've had times where I thought it might snow on Christmas. So it's run the gamut.